Everyone, it's the Tim Show, joined with John Snyder for the Tim and John Show. It's been a little while since the last time we had a show. I've got a lot of things going on in the background right now. Well, right now in the background, I've got the beautiful West Palm Beach, little intercoastal canal behind me, as you guys can see for your viewing pleasure. But yeah, so I'm actually like in the process right now of trying to create a crypto-only investment firm, and so that's taking up some time, as well as just doing regular business stuff. So thank you everyone out there who's been keeping me busy, and thank you for everyone who's been wanting more Tim and John shows. But yeah, it's been too long since I've talked to my good friend John, at least on air. And I think today a good place to start would probably be interest rates. I know we started last time. We did a video. We had talked about the 10-year Treasury was getting a little, but it was right around 1.5 last time. Right now, as we're looking at it, I should have had it pulled up. But I think it's like 1.62, 1.63. When I checked
Yeah,
a few moments ago.
1.63. Here's the screen.
1.6. So as you remember, we did talk about as interest rates start getting above 1.5, that's really sort of that, flashing yellow, getting into that danger zone. And then really when you're getting, 1.75 to 2, that's when the danger zone starts going from maybe yellow to getting pinkish. And then I think once we get over 2, then that's going to be where things are flashing red. And so, you can get this whole phony fake economy, have things going when interest rates are, near zero, but, they've gone up quite a bit, especially on the 10-year, which is sort of the benchmark Treasury. Now we also have, the overnight lending rates or the repo rates, another benchmark that is widely commented on, but we've got a lot of information on that coming up. So I know what a sexy topic to talk about is the overnight lending rate and SLR rates and all sorts of other things of that nature. But what you've got a lot of comments by Paul. I mean, he's made a lot of comments too about Bitcoin too recently, but we'll get to that. But Paul has made a lot of comments about how, they're not going to do different types of yield curve control, and how they're not going to target certain interest rates on the 10-year, which basically leads me to believe that that's exactly what they're going to do. And so I think because they want inflation to run hotter, they want it to run higher. I mean, even if they really wanted it to run higher, they could just accurately count the inflation price. I mean, that's for one. They do everything they can to rig those numbers. But the real thing is they are trapped. There's absolutely no way they can ever effectively actually raise rates, because when you have the entire Ponzi scheme economy that is predicated on basically having to issue more and more and more debt, which the money is backed by debt or the currency is backed by debt. So for this huge cycle of having to get deeper and deeper into the hole. And so that's why, a lot of the inflation to me is actually in the financial assets, in things like Bitcoin. It's in things like now we're seeing oil starting to move. It's in things like lumber pricing. It's in things that retirees and my clients want to buy. That's where all the inflation is. So it might not be in, little gizmos and little, the phone I'm talking into now and things like that, but, it is in everything else. So John, so what are you seeing when it comes to interest rates, and is it, is the 10-year more in your mind, or is the repo market more in your mind? What are you seeing out there?
Well, here, so what, let's just go straight to the website here of the Federal Reserve. And as you can see here, they're actually buying on the longer range. Like this is a 20-year bond here, that the 20 to 30-year bond. And then like if you go down there, so they're actually like doing some of it, not on a big scale yet at all. But they are, as you can see here, they are purchasing, 1.73 billion, 1 point something billion. So they are purchasing bonds on the longer range. Even this is the 15th of March here. But not, as I said.
That is unusual. Yeah. That is unusual for them. And even
Yeah.
when Donald Trump was running for president the first time in 2016, he was saying, oh, what an idiot that Obama was for having all these short-term bonds. And then what did Trump and Mnuchin do? They went and they actually shortened the average maturity. I don't know what the average maturity is, but the thing is, it's not very long. It's like 2 to 5 years, somewhere in that range. And so, the fact that the government can't even lend money out, borrow money at 30 years because they can't afford the incremental difference. But this seems to be a deviation from that. And now that they are buying some of those longer term bonds, which, from a financial standpoint would seem to be the smarter thing to do. But maybe that's because there's not really a huge discrepancy between maybe the 10-year and where the 20-year is.
Yeah, no, what's happening is that they're basically, doing not yield control, curve control on a big scale whatsoever, but they're actually purchasing debt that are longer terms, which is, in the 20-year range. As you, let me share the screen here so we could actually see Yeah, so here, like the 20-year term, on 30-year term, this is the yield curve itself here. As you can see, look at the lower range here. Like you're looking at like 0.01 for the 1 month, and if we actually go over to the let's see now the overnight rate, which it was actually George Gammon that pointed this out first, but he was saying that, oh, it's going negative, like it's repo market lending is in the negative territory. And sure enough, if you look at the actual best rates that you're getting here, they have turned now fully negative for a whole week, basically. And you can see here there was a tiny little bit of blips before, but now basically, and you can see there's, overnight here, there's basically anywhere from 850 to 920 billion dollars that are getting moved in the overnight markets. So you're seeing the moves here down to the negative territory. So it's very interesting to watch that and see what's happening there. And meanwhile, Jerome Powell has been out talking a lot lately about different things. He's talked about Bitcoin. He mentioned Bitcoin the other day, and I find it very interesting to hear that he was actually saying that Bitcoin is a replacement for gold, basically. And then he ended up saying that Bitcoin is not gold. Like it was basically like he was saying two total opposite things in the same damn conversation when you listen to him.
I did see that. And
Yeah.
the thing is, I mean, I do agree with him that Bitcoin has turned into digital gold, and it's turned into a better form of gold than even gold, in my opinion. And nowadays you're seeing, even more sophisticated people, smarter people out there who are starting to realize that in the investment world. I mean, I'm sort of seeing it at the ground floor, the retail level of different investors who are coming to me with and these are not your typical Bitcoin investors who are coming to me interested more in the space. But ideally, the money should be something that's hard. The money should be something that is backed by something. And so, if gold is, Bitcoin is a better version of gold, then why does that mean that Bitcoin can't be a good form of money? And maybe Bitcoin, to a great extent, is not a good form of currency. And that is probably be changed, like things like Lightning. Not necessarily the world's greatest fan of the Lightning network, but that's a whole other topic. And I'm actually in the process now. I had this going when I left from Arizona down to Florida. And it's funny because the week before that, I was in Texas. So here I am at like all the freedom places, between Florida, Texas, and Arizona. And I will say I've got to give Arizona the edge in when it comes to the different freedom categories. Like I don't really see people around here walking around without masks really in most of the stores. And now it's going to be like localized and highly specific. And there was places in Texas that weren't great for when it came to masks, and then there were some places that were amazing, like Fredericksburg, Texas. So I'll give a shout out to Fredericksburg, that when we were rolling through there, that no one in there was wearing masks. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's individual choice. Isn't that funny how that works, Tim? How easy that is. I was actually listening to who is it, Governor Noem of South Dakota, and she was talking about in a speech, and she was saying that individual freedom is key, and to have the individuals making their own choices. So I was like, what? Do you say that?
I did break my 8-month streak of wearing a mask to go on the plane. And so I wore an N100 gas mask and with a COVID 1984 shirt. And I do have video of it in case not that anybody is doubting me, because I mean I'm always
we saw the picture, so it was pretty hilarious.
and actually the TSA guy mentioned some sort of he basically referred to this whole thing as nonsense. And there was a guy in the plane who he also gave me a little fist bump and liked it. I mean, like one of the air flight attendant people. And then of course, so here I am, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the best thing possible. Not to start a little deviation here, but I'm like, this is the perfect thing. We got to spice things up. We're talking about really boring stuff, so let's spice it up with some stories. So I'm going to sit down and on Southwest, where you get to pick your own seat. And so there was, I think, 50 open spots. I'm like, no one's going to sit next to me looking like an idiot here with the N100 mask and like the full get up and the COVID 1984 shirt. And all of a sudden there's some maybe 25, 26-year-old girl who sits down next to me. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, I thought this is the perfect get up. And so I go to take off my mask, like the one that looked ridiculous, because I wasn't gonna be able to breathe in that thing the entire way. So I then put on like some mask my dad got me this summertime that I never wore, and the girl opens up a book, and I peer over it, and I see the words right hand path, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I know left hand path is like the devil, and there's a lot of occultic things with that sort of terminology. And then the book closes over like a minute later, and it's the Satanic Bible. So of course, I somehow attracted a lady that was reading the Satanic Bible next to me, but then she fell asleep like 2 seconds later. So I did want to see if I could like engage in some sort of conversation with her, but I'm like, yeah, that's what the N100 mask attracts, somebody with the Satanic Bible. But probably just someone that was confused and trying to appear. But I don't. Someone's like, "Oh man, I hope he didn't put a hex in you." I'm like, "Well, she was only on page 1 of the Satanic Bible, so I'm not really too worried about her putting a hex in me from that perspective." But in terms of putting a hex, I mean, let's even get into like what so a repo rate is. So you got some banks that let's say have 10% in reserves, some banks that have let's say one bank has 11% in reserves, one bank has 9% in reserves, need to have 10, which now I don't even know if they even need to have any money in reserves now. But let's say historically you'd have closer to 10% reserves. And so the bank that had 9 would borrow from the bank that had 11, and they'd both square up and they'd have 10. And so now it's basically saying that the bank that would have 9% in reserves would get paid by the other bank to borrow money from them. But technically it's not, because in actuality, they don't actually go to the Federal Reserve to borrow money. So that is the repo rate. And I maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, historically, they didn't go to the banks. They didn't go to the Fed because that was sort of like putting a scarlet letter on yourself. And if you guys go back 2 years ago, what really happened was, it was September 17th, 2018. You had the overnight repo rate for banks charging other banks was shot up to 10%. And why that's important is they could have went to each other and gotten money for, I forgot what it was at the time, like 1.5%. It was at the highest that it was at the time. And so they could have borrowed money from the Fed at 1.5 or right around there. Maybe it was a little more than that. But they chose to borrow money from each other at 10 to not expose everything. And that's when all of a sudden we had the multi-trillion-dollar repos, and anyone can basically go back to all the shows that John and I did right around that time to basically timestamp this in history to see what was going on. But yeah, what are we taking a look at there now?
What we're looking at is actually the list of globally systemically important banks by the Financial Stability Board, and this is kind of the capital buffers that we're talking about, because we're actually turning towards what is called, let me just get the right name for it here, just 1 second. It's called a supplement the supplementary leverage ratio, the SLR, which is actually running out on March 31st. So what I looked at, Tim, is I did a little bit of research, and I found out that this was back on April 1st, 2020. And as you can see here, the change would temporarily decrease tier 1 capital requirements of holding companies by approximately 2% in aggregate. And it says also the hold if it requires them to hold minimum ratio of 3% measured against their total leverage exposure without stringent requirements for the largest and most systemic financial institutions. So these are the most systemic. Wrong one. Most systemic.
So what does it look like? So this is so from the bank's perspective, what does it mean if it does expire? What does it mean if it doesn't expire and is extended out? Like, what's the sort of the implications of that?
So what I think it is, like, I might be a little bit wrong on this, but from what I've read, it seems like it's actually the requirements of, as it says here, additional capital buffers. So here you can see the different tiers, of importance of banks. Like JP Morgan was all the way alone up here the year before in 2019. So they actually dropped down in requirement. So here you can see the reserve, like the additional capital buffers needed, 2% for Citi, HSBC, and JP Morgan, then 1.5 for Bank
So
of
does this
America.
mean that essentially that if this were to expire, that this would then unlock like tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of extra capital that these banks now would no longer have to have in special reserves to then
No, they would have to get more. From what I learned, they would have to get more because they actually decrease. Yeah, they decrease the capital requirements. So they actually would need to get back to, more higher levels. And these are the international
Oh,
levels. Yeah,
the levels were reduced, so the
yeah,
requirements were reduced temporarily, and then now they're being
yeah, to make it
instituted
easier.
again.
Yeah, because then that way it said in the article here that they could actually lend more to, banks and people in need. Yeah,
I think this is all leading to a problem reaction solution where what they know is that when the rates do get over 2%, that's sort of that danger zone. We're not the only ones that know this in the world.
yeah,
And so I think now the average person doesn't know this. And so they're going to wait till it gets over 2, then maybe the stock market drops 10%, and then maybe it drops 12 or 15, and then Powell comes out to, save the day. And so the thing is, if he were to just to, be a hero in quotes here for everyone that's listening to us, what would, because you get guys like Ben Bernanke who they write books on this. They called what was his book of The Courage to Act or some crap like that. And so, when you get someone like Powell, I think they're waiting for the excuse to have people beg for more basically intervention. And so if the market's going down and things are going bad, you throw up 2 or 3 days of really bad headlines, and all of a sudden the Fed comes in to have another $6 trillion rescue plan where they pay for Biden's $4 trillion plan that's also supposedly going to be raising taxes on some people as well. And then you wait for that reaction, and then all of a sudden now you got carte blanche authority to start printing money again when you said you weren't. And then they use that to then target yield curve control, and they then maybe start targeting a sub 1% 10-year treasury, and they start buying up 10-year treasuries to artificially manipulate that market. And I don't even think that this is, and the thing is, I'm saying this like as a prediction, but I almost don't even feel like it is a prediction because I feel like it's so obvious that, I
well,
mean, it's like I'm going to go outside later today on the beach, and I'm going to get hot when it's 80 something degrees out, and I might get a tan. Like I'm not predicting anything. Like it's like
yeah.
this is like more than likely what is going to happen.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
mean,
obvious. No, Tim, this I gotta share this because, like, talking about yield curve control, I thought this chart is actually amazing. By the way, somebody shared it on LinkedIn. And I had to, I think it was Tavik Costa, one of the biggest traders out there, but he shared a
this
fantastic
is
chart.
all very positive news long term for Bitcoin. Everything we're saying though right now.
Oh, 100%. The more money that slushes out in the market, the cheaper money gets, the more money is gonna, actually currency is gonna come out into the markets. As you can see here, this is very interesting because this is a
And no,
700 year.
no pun intended, but no pun intended either with 100%, because
Yeah.
if they keep doing this, it could go up more than 100%. And I still think it's going to be over 100,000 price target end of year. Start with that.
Yeah, I said, 150 to 300 because I'm not sure, how much money, how much currency is gonna pile into it because uh, it's, we can't predict the future,
I mean,
unfortunately.
Biden's got a they're proposing a $4 trillion infrastructure plan, which doesn't surprise me, which is why I moved some client investments to infrastructure
Yeah.
right as that capital siege was going down. And I'll say siege and hyperbolic air quotes over here, but
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can't fight, the Federal Reserve or any central bank when they and the government is starting to print currency out of thin air and start slushing it around. You just gotta go with the flow basically and go into assets and Bitcoin and now of course there's going to be a big boom in infrastructure, related companies and corporations. So that's going to be, an interesting bet coming up. That's of course my opinion. It's not, financial advice coming from me, but I just want to share this, going back to the chart here, Tim, because this is a 700-year chart of debt. How much is actually, and if you could actually see, the annual real rate trend is per annum. No, what is it here? Yeah, you can actually see. So basically, this is the trend, going all the way back to the Spanish. What is it here, Van Halen? Yeah, you going back like to the early 1300s here. And as you can see, this is yield curve, the yield curve of borrowing currency throughout history. Look at this, Tim. It's really trending down. Of course, this peak here is the top of the savings and loan crisis where,
like 81,
peaked out at,
82.
yeah, peaked out at 18. My parents actually borrowed for their house 18% when they in 84 in Norway when they were currencies. So it's pretty insane. But yeah, as you can see here, it's like a slow down sloping trend, throughout history. And as we invented more and more technology, it's easier and easier to, slush that currency around and create more of it faster than ever. So it's interesting,
Well,
like
and
looking at
along
this.
that time horizon, the fiat money finds its natural intrinsic value of 0. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's where things are going. And actually, you remember you were on Kirk Chisholm's podcast, the Money Tree
Yeah.
podcast. I'm not sure when it was, maybe, I don't know, like a while ago, 9-10 months. And I believe that was the last time they had me on there as well, because I was staunchly defending you a little bit too much in their opinion. And anyways, they just had on Paul Rosenberg as another guest. And he's the crypto hippie. He's a guy that thinks a lot like us and a lot like our listeners. I want to call them readers because of Sam Tripoli podcast, where he calls his listeners readers because they messed up once. I think that's hilarious. I'm
Yeah.
Cash Daddies.
Very funny.
But yeah, what was I just saying? Oh man, I just got distracted looking around.
No, you're talking about Kirk
But
Chisholm.
oh yeah, so then these two, one was a Forbes columnist and another lives in San Francisco, and you can already tell where this is going. And so they were just mentioned, basically this is going to be a highlight reel type episode once it comes out, so I can't wait till, hopefully they didn't edit me too much in there, and hopefully it all comes out. But yeah, where I was going with this is that basically at one point one of the commenters was trying to say, oh yeah, well, history always repeats itself. And this was basically as something saying that Bitcoin's going to 0. I'm like, well, yeah, history always repeats itself, that every fiat currency has always gone to 0. So thank you for reminding us of that. And like the more, fiat currency that's printed, the more likelihood that it's eventually going to go to 0 on a long enough time horizon. Now it could temporarily get stronger as people do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And, that's just sort of, human nature is what always happens.
But if you look at
That'd be
today's,
temporary. That would be temporary.
yeah, but if you look at today's like behavior from the central bankers, there's zero chance of it strengthening really at all against anything of real value, unfortunately, because they are adamant to put in and buy every single asset that is collapsing in value to prop it up again. That's been shown, by their balance sheet. If you like here, I could share you their balance sheet here with everybody for a second, so you could actually see how much the Federal Reserve has been buying of different assets. Let's see here. I gotta find it though. Where did I put it now? Oh, here. So here, if we go in here, I'm gonna go down to their balance sheet, the Fed's balance sheet, which is right here. So as you can see, they've been buying, and continues to go up here. They continue to do quantitative easing right now, Tim, and it's actually like going up quite fast. Like if you look at the bottom, like it was all the way down. This was in September of last year. We were all the way down at 6.92 trillion that they held. They peaked out at 7.16, but then they've been buying again. And as you can see, it's almost like this little peak down here. Like this is the last 2008 crisis. As you can see here, there's a buy up here again, up to the new levels. But what you're seeing here is very different, Tim. Like look at how rapid this is. As you can see here, you're looking at the peak here, like, and then it kind of flattened for a very long time, like several
Well,
years.
the other thing that people aren't seeing. So when it does flatten out, and that's like 2014, around October 2014, what the story that's not being told is that's when all the other central banks around the world started going nuts around October 2014. So even though it was like a hot potato, where even though the Federal Reserve wasn't necessarily the one that was printing the money at the time, it was the other banks, and now it's just every single bank. And I'm not sure if you sent this to me or if it's just on my computer right now, but there was, I think last week there was some sort of hearing where Powell and Janet Yellen were both on stage at the same time and downplaying the risk of, as Powell downplays inflation risk, as Yellen foreshadowed future spending. Yep, boom, right there. And basically, yeah, I mean, it goes on to say that basically, our best view is that the effect on inflation will be neither particularly large nor persistent. And this is Jerome Powell. And, basically Yellen's saying the same thing, and they're sort of echoing Mario Draghi by saying, you know, they're willing to go all in and sort of do whatever it takes type atmosphere. So you guys remember like Mario Draghi was the European Central Bank head who I think it was probably around like 2013, 2014-ish, you know, basically said that they're going to be going all in. Now he's the prime minister of Italy. So, you know, my people over there definitely are not doing me proud having Mario Draghi as
And
their prime minister.
yeah, and talking about more currency creation here, look at this article here, which is, of course, who probably will replace, you know, Jerome Powell when he could potentially leave. I don't think any central banker wants longer than their actual physical term this time, because it's like
I think
play.
I don't know. I think Paul might.
Yeah.
I think he might get nominated again by Biden. But yeah, no, that is a good point
Yeah.
you bring up because they're all basically on this. No one wants to go down with the ship, and they're all on this. You know, certain. You know, there's certain expiration. I mean, I'm sort of surprised that Janet Yellen made it out of Dodge without something blowing up on her. I mean, and we're talking the economy,
What?
not
Yeah, and
any
she
physical
said that we're
capacity.
never gonna have a financial crisis in our lifetime. So I guess
But does she blame that on like a UTI infection or something? Oh, sorry, I
No,
just having a bad day.
me. That was me and Josh making that conclusion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny.
because actually people like ladies when they get it in older age, they actually could get delusional, and it happened to my mother-in-law actually, where she got a little bit delusional from it. So you're just, you know, joking around that when she said it, you know, and at the same time she so we just, you know, made a fuck. We tried to poke fun at it, of the insanity that's going on, right? So, but here again, you know, Lael Brainard is, of course, a current U.S. Federal Reserve governor, but she might be the one that could take over. But she wants to create a new financial stability climate committee. And this is another trend, you know, to be able to spend a ton of more money to, you know, blame an outcome on something. I just did a recent rant, kind of about what she's talking about here, that we just gotta blame something and then we gotta print atrocious amounts of currency into existence. And I think this is the
That's
next
basically
big,
what Klaus
yeah,
Schwab's book. I mean, that's what
yeah,
Klaus Anno Schwab's book, you know, talks about.
yeah.
Is basically using this as a great reset to set it in a more sustainable type fashion. Which is funny because a lot of, you know, people that we know and people even like us and hopefully me in the very near future are either homesteading or thinking about homesteading or doing things or living off grid. And it's funny that we're sort of demonized as the bad guys when in actuality, we're the ones who are actually living more sustainable lives than pretty much, you know, a lot of the other public, especially, you know, your average, you know, fake progressive, fake liberal that's out there. But one thing, I sent this over to you on Signal just a little bit ago, and it was Fed's Powell would pursue digital currency only with congressional support. And then if you take a look actually at the article,
Yeah.
and of course they're at the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, but we would not proceed without support from Congress. And the passage of any needed authorizing laws, Paul said, when asked at a Bank of International Settlements conference whether it even be legal for the Fed to create a digital currency. And you know they're collaborating with MIT's digital currency initiative, focusing on the capabilities and limitations of technologies, not an attempt to create a prototype. Let's just try to build the basis and see what we can learn. So you know it's just a very cute type statement of let's just see what we can learn. And so I mean, yeah, I mean, we'll just see what Congress has to say about it. Well, the thing is, when they have all the money and they can just, you know, dole out, you know, $4 trillion for a new infrastructure plan. I mean, how hard is it to buy off Congress? I mean, we're gonna. I mean, they didn't see what Congress would say when they had, you know, BlackRock acting as a middleman to then buy up all the corporate debt through these special purpose vehicles.
Yeah.
That was, you know, basically illegal in my opinion. You know, I didn't see them going to Congress for congressional support
Well,
or
they were
congressional
getting,
authorization
yeah,
over
they were
that or.
getting, yeah, they were getting paid a substantial amount. I forgot what it was, but we did, I think we did show at one point the actual contract because I dug it up from the Fed's website, and
Yeah.
yeah, and they were getting paid X percentage of every single, you know, trade. So it was great getting rid of toxic sludge. You basically get paid for it. It's fantastic. You know, it's the
But
best,
I
probably. Yeah.
can't tell you how many smart people that I've talked to lots of smart people, but the people who aren't necessarily in this you know this arena that you know we're in and our listeners are in. I always want to call them readers that they're in, but most people have not heard about central bank digital currencies who are out there.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if you're talking to former CFOs or treasurers or just very high Q individuals, like almost nobody, it's like not on anybody's radar. Like I mean, if you're in the crypto space, you probably have heard of it, or happen to be within 5 feet of me at any point, throughout the day, probably hear of it, or John. But, aside from that, there's really not really a huge appetite of people talking about this. And then I really do think it's one of the biggest stories that's out there because it's coming. And another article I sent you, and I don't even have it up right now, I'm trying to find it. It's from LouRockwell.com. And it's talking about how IBM is now partnering with Moderna for a COVID reset. And basically, it's talking about how the health passports are, eventually become mandatory. And that's going to be integrated into IBM Watson's, blockchain. Yep. And so it's funny because you mentioned IBM, or I mentioned IBM Watson. So I don't watch any TV, but I'm here with my grandparents and they've got the TV on, and I heard an ad about Watson. And for whatever reason, it just absolutely triggered me. And I went into like this whole rant. I wish I would have even filmed it, because what people don't know, and not to make like a huge aside on this, but Watson was his name after Dr. Thomas Watson. When he died, he gave all his money to the Nazis. The IBM's Hollerith machine was the one that was designed to basically categorize Jews and seeing which ones should be worked, which ones should be put to death, so on and so forth. Very, very nice guy, obviously. And then Hitler then created the double Iron Eagle Cross, which was sort of like their version of the Medal of Freedom award. And I think he even created like that as a medal higher than any other medal. And so now you have the VA's healthcare system, and you have these health passports trying to get integrated in with Watson, when Watson was an actual Nazi. And then you get tied into, oh, well, then Bill Gates' mother was on the board of IBM that basically gave him the millions of dollars and all the resources and like 1,000 people to go help create Microsoft. And then he didn't really even create Microsoft. He stole it from this other guy named Gary Furdahl. And that gets into a whole nother story. But it's funny like how all this stuff is, eventually gets tied together. And now this is the first time I've seen where they've tried partnering with Moderna to in there, like in certain places. And one of the reasons I'm here is that the article does talk about how vaccine passes are rolling out in New York right now, and at least in New York City. Is that my family is from upstate New York, and so right now, a few of them are down here in Florida. So I'm like, you know what, I'll go and visit you guys while you're in Florida, because I don't really feel like going back to the communist regime of New York anytime soon, at least until they get rid of all these quarantines and all that nonsense.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, Tim. It's what's interesting is here in Canada, they are like, oh, we're gonna, on the near foreseeable future, we're gonna have the US-Canada border closed. Like, how long are they gonna keep that closed, and how long are you gonna actually keep this going without completely eviscerating the whole economy? And we're not talking about the gigantic corporations that get bailed out, by the central bank. Here in Canada, actually, our central bank has now started to buy derivatives. I haven't been able to look at the actual details on that, but they bought 8.6 billion so far in about 3 months span, which is doesn't sound like much for Americans if you know the Fed's balance sheet, but it's actually quite substantial for the our current balance sheet, because it's over 1% of the balance sheet is now derivatives that has been bought. Because me and Josh, we did a lot of videos on different things. We did a video on the biggest mortgage lender, Home
I'm
Capital.
sure they're just hedging like corn, wheat futures. No, just kidding.
No, we did a video. This is interesting, Tim. I don't know if you heard this one, but Home Capital Group was one of the biggest mortgage lenders in Canada. It got basically on the verge of collapse. As I was finishing my book, so I put a little chapter just about Home Capital Group in there, and Papa Buffett came out and he bailed them out 13 billion. What is more interesting is that nobody covered us. I think me and Josh were basically one of the few. There was a mainstream media outlet in Canada that did cover it, but they didn't cover it in a way to ask the question, because about, I think it was like 5-6 months after now, this whole collapse in Home Capital Group, they did a mortgage-backed security, AAA rated issuance of the debt, of course, like of all these mortgages that they had on the books. So it's just very interesting, isn't it, Tim, how they got bailed out and then suddenly they come out with a AAA rated mortgage-backed, security right after they were bailed out by Buffett. Of course, Buffett is, he took over Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo is probably one of the most corrupted banks in the world. Like, I don't remember how many times me and Josh, covered anything from auto insurance fraud to, all the fake bank accounts. Remember that whole kerfuffle? They did a wide array of other things as well, but it was just like rotten to its core, and it was
Signing
funny.
up people for credit cards who never asked for
Oh
credit
yeah,
cards.
and then Papa Buffett is there. It's like, you naughty boys. Comes in there.
Let me
Meanwhile,
give
he
you a
was the
very
one that bought
stern
it, and that's
slap on the
when,
wrist.
yeah. It's hilarious. But banksters are very corrupt. They've been that throughout the whole history of banking. There's never been a time throughout history where they haven't gotten into corrupt behavior, because when you create money out of thin air, you will get corrupt behavior when you could do that. Like, there's like human psychology is just can't grasp with that of having unlimited supply of anything, and they just can't be able to control that desire to create more of it. It's just like a detriment that we have when we try to create a currency and a medium of exchange with the best intentions throughout history, but every single time we screw it up. But I think Bitcoin,
Yeah,
very
the
interesting, going
big
back, to Bitcoin is a very interesting thing because it has a fixed supply in 2100. Now, of course, over hundreds of years span, Bitcoin,
21 million.
21 million, and Bitcoin, but gotta remember, a lot of them are gone. They might be just 18 million, right? So there's even probably a lot less
I
in
think there's
supply.
estimates that up to 4 have been lost
Yeah,
already,
which
4
is,
million.
yeah,
So,
exactly. So like, you're looking at, like, that's a very damn scarce asset.
and
And
then take a look at how many people are just long term just holding or hodling, and then I mean, obviously you get people who bought in at 5 cents that want to go cash out a few $1,000,000, go buy a dream home, and
yeah,
basically have their FU life of, hey, we can, but they still want to keep their hundreds of Bitcoin or thousands of Bitcoin, and they're selling because they want to diversify and actually live a life, and but
well, that's who you
but
talk to,
it's
isn't it, Tim? Like, you talk to a
and
lot of those guys.
these are, I mean,
Yeah,
so I do have a window into this, and so they're not selling because they think it's going to zero, or I mean, a lot of them think it's, hey, it's going to go to like $1,000,000, but uh, it's like, hey, you know what, we got it enough now. We want to, cash out a little bit. We want to do so in a, tax advantage way, and that's a whole
yeah,
other thing right now. But yeah, I mean, we're taking a look. Bitcoin's just under 57,000 right now. And I see certain people like, oh, Bitcoin's crashing. I think it was 54,000 at one point over the weekend. But and to me, I feel like you're not going to see as those big 80% drops in the near future, because you're going to see essentially. And now a lot of people know I was the guy that was telling everybody a year ago or 13 months ago that there was going to be an 80% drop in Bitcoin next time there was a financial crisis. And you were there front row taping that presentation or taping that Q&A session where
yeah.
I said, I think next time there's a financial crisis, Bitcoin would go down by probably 80% because it's a risk asset. And so I'm not just somebody just, always touting this one narrative. And so things changed. And the thing that's changed is that now you've got major institutions looking to buy these dips. And so, absent, major institutions, there probably would be it would have, we probably would have had another major correction
Yeah.
already would have happened between now and the last 4 months.
Well,
But we're not seeing that because you have these major institutions looking in, and every time it goes down, 2, 3, 4, 5, $6,000, they're looking at buying these dips.
yeah,
And
100%
that's
they are, and
and the stuff they're buying, obviously there's some traders and there's people who are, I mean, a lot of traders, but we have people who are just buying and just holding on to it, and then they're
yeah.
sucking that supply out. So now there's less supply, for the other general public when they eventually, realize that they should have been listening to us a while ago.
Well, yeah, so take a look at this chart, right? Like, everybody's screaming bubble, bubble. And it makes sense if you look at this chart, but if you go into the logarithmic chart, and this also brings us back to another chart that I'll put up in a little bit. But as you could see here, we haven't moved fully up yet. I think there's more to come. Like at least 100,000 level, Tim. looks within, like if you look at the moves in between, every time, it goes down and then comes back up again. So it's definitely hasn't seen, the highs yet. And it's not like just looking at this chart and predicting it that way is also kind of false, because what you're doing is you're actually like looking at it in the perspective of a technical trader, but you're not looking at it at the perspective of the trillions of dollars that are sitting on the fence, looking at this, the Apples, the Walmart, whoever it is that, sitting on tons of cash on their balance sheet. But with inflation, that cash is going to get this decimated in value. So they need to park it somewhere where it's actually going to have be able to protect their wealth and their balance sheet. And so I think a lot of more corporations will do what MicroStrategies and Michael Saylor did, was to protect his business, was to go in, a lot of times, like actually the richest guy in Norway, Kjell Inge Røkke, he actually created a holding company now that fully invests tons in crypto, and he bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin. I think it was like a
Well, it's
billion or
hard to
something.
be the
Yeah.
first guy. I mean, it's hard to be the first guy doing something. It's hard to be the second guy doing something. But if you're the third or fourth or fifth, and S&P 500 type company,
Yeah.
it takes less courage at that point. And so so hats off to Michael Saylor. And if anyone has any contacts to Michael Saylor to get him on the Tim and John show, that would be excellent, because I think when it comes to people that are very well spoken and who sort of get it, and it also helps that he's newer in the space and newer in this line of thinking in terms of what's going on with the debt markets and the whole monetary system, because the average person is just not thinking about the monetary system on a daily basis. And so I mean, because they're not like us, because that's what we have the Tim and John show for.
Yeah.
But when you have someone like Michael Saylor who really gets it, I think that his videos are probably one of the best things to send to maybe someone that's not really initiated into the whole greater Bitcoin ecosystem, or just have somebody start off with like, hey, just buy $50 worth. I mean, what's $50 worth if you're looking to get into
you
it?
don't have to buy a whole damn coin. Like, come on, that's that whole thought and behavior is like, I want to buy one. I need to hold a unit of something. You could fractionalize Bitcoin. You could rewrite the algorithm to fractionalize into 32 zeros behind the comma, or 64 zeros behind the comma if Bitcoin becomes extremely overloaded in value, because then it's easier to, so it's infinitely divisible. The gold
It's
would
not that
never be able
Bitcoin
to.
becomes overvalued. It's if well, I mean, that can happen too, obviously, in short
The fiat
periods
has
of time.
become undervalued. Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. But if you go and take a look at, let's say that we had a world where Bitcoin only exists. Well, now we have a stable, way stable, more stable currency than anything else that we've ever seen in history. Of course, banksters, governments, they don't want that. They don't want a stable currency. They don't want something that could hold its purchasing power. Think
Well, I
about where
forgot
our
who it
world
was.
would be. Yeah, but Tim, sorry to interrupt you. Think about where our world would be if we had a stable currency that actually people could get paid, and one thing, never have a pay raise for 20 years and still have the same, about the same purchasing power. That's pretty incredible. That has never really
Well, that
happened.
brings back to another point of no one ever talks about the money itself. I mean, we do, but but when you take a look at 1964, I think the minimum wage was. Hopefully, you guys can hear. There's somebody with a power saw behind me. But in 1964, I believe the minimum wage was $1.06. I think it was $1.25. So expressed another way, that was 5 quarters. And so those quarters had real silver, or like 90% silver back then. And so, I mean, you're taking a look at somewhere of over $30. I mean, depending on if you're looking at the spot price of silver or the actual premium you get over it, and you're looking at somewhere in the $30 range. And so the minimum wage was really expressed in silver was closer to $30 an hour back in 1964 at $1.25. And it's the money that's lost its value. And this is the concept where if this is one of your first times checking us out, or you haven't really ever explored that subject before, it's really one of the biggest things you need to wrap your mind around. And it's something where I think that it's a coalescing issue that if we could sort of impart to millennials and people, Bernie Sanders bros and the generation below us too. I forgot what they're called, Gen Z. And I mean, if we can impart to them, like, listen, we get your plight and we get your we get, where you're coming from on this, but it's not, wait, if you're going to make the minimum wage $15 an hour, why don't you just make it $100 an hour? I mean, there's really, if you're just going to pull a number out of the air. And the problem is it's the money itself. And that's something that I think can't be overstated enough. And is really, in my opinion, sort of the root cause of almost every problem. I mean, obviously you can get into, spirituality and other shit where stuff is going and, go down that road too, in terms of, what's really the problem with everything. But, it's, if you believe in good, then I guess you have to believe in evil. And if there was evil, what would they be doing? They'd be, they would be taking over different airwaves and trying to program you and get you to sway public opinion to think of one certain thing. And so I don't get how all these leftists who hate all the corporations or hate all the big money type people who then get behind all the messaging that the entire system wants to push because
because they don't have a clue about money. That's the unfortunate thing. Look at this, like this is a great chart here because we're looking at like the money creation versus the median income. This is very interesting. So let's take a look at how much, I don't like, I shouldn't call it money. I know that Mike Maloney would be very angry if he heard that. So it's currency, units in supply. But as you can see here, Tim, you could see the US M2 money supply. You could see it back in 2000. This is a great measure here. It was 4.7. So let's say it was 5. Let's say it's gone up about 400%. Right? Well, let's look at the median income. That has not gone up 400%. That has been pretty stagnant. It's up like
almost 500%.
Yeah, it's up 10%. Meanwhile, the money supply is up 500%. So you could see the huge distortions. Not that that makes sense to have such a massive increase in income, but you definitely need a lot more than just 3%. What is it? 10%? Yeah, increase in your salary over 20 years. That is detrimental, and because it's not keeping up to the money supply and real inflation, not the CPI that you're watching, that the academics put out, because that's highly, and Tim has actually created a little booklet on that, describing in great detail how they manipulate those numbers. And I've kind of talked about the real estate thing. There was actually an expert on CPI on Real Vision that I was listening to. He got actually angry that we use real estate because it doesn't make sense to have real estate in there. Meanwhile, in Canada, that is about 75 to 80% of 70% of the population uses 70 to 80% of their total income to pay for real estate related costs. So it's like that we shouldn't have that as a part. In Canada, we do. It says that it's 25.6%, but the real number is around 70 to 80%. So it's quite a huge distortion in CPI there if they want to actually look at the real number. And it's not even the average of all the provinces even. But you shouldn't average the provinces, because in where like 50, 60, 70% of the population live, like you're looking at 70, 80% and not, 30, 40% that it is in smaller provinces. So again, it's that distortion, it's that constant, talk to my mom all the time about, like, she's like, oh, my salary went up. But then I was like, well, let's take a look at it. How much has your cost gone up this year? And sure enough, ate up more than the salary. The costs are going up higher. The rent is going up higher. Norway is in a exalted bubble. Like even the central bank is talking about bubble now in Norway. So all this currency printing, all this like keeping interest rates at zero, all that it's creating is an epic bubble that we've never seen before. And again, it goes back to that 700-year chart of interest rates, Tim. The cost of currency to borrow it. It's just at record lows right now. It's never, ever, ever in history been this low. And they're going to go negative. They have to, right, Tim? And they have to implement these central bank digital currencies to take away our possibility to pull our money out of the bank. Because if we pull our money out of the bank, well, the bank is done very quickly because they don't have nowhere near the capital. Actually, you're muted, Tim.
Yeah, there's some nice like reggae music
Oh,
behind me. I didn't want it to
oh,
affect you guys, but but, I mean, once they have the central bank digital currency, at that point they can say, hey, you're not allowed to take money from fiat to go into Bitcoin, which then
yeah,
would probably make Bitcoin go up even more.
yeah,
But I mean, that's where, or it's like, hey, since it's tracked, like, hey, you're not allowed to buy more than $1,000 at a time, or it'll probably start at like 5,000 or 3,000, and then they'll ratchet things, tighter and tighter and tighter. And so, and they've already floated out the idea of not being able to, let's say if I take $3,000 off Coinbase, they want to have it where now the receiving wallet has to be KYC, know your customer, in order to just move money off of that exchange.
what?
And that's probably
Yeah.
going to be coming within the next, I would guess, the next 1 to 3 years. I could see that.
Well, it has to,
I could
yeah,
see that rolling out.
because they're in real deep trouble. Also, another thing that I thought of to do that, Tim, is that we could actually like go and create the other currencies, of course, and Bitcoin as well, that people can mine themselves on different outlets and ways that they could, be able to mine these currencies, and then we could actually, directly earn that currency and then spread it out and have a separate currency running in the system outside of the central bank digital currency if they go that way. That's just a thought that came into my mind that you can do it. And of course, it's a little pricey to buy those fancy miners, but if you actually created I know there's certain people trying to create something that's more easily mineable for the general population. If you did that, like now, everybody could get a piece of that currency and start using it, and then circumvent those central bank digital currencies. Or it could go the way of the Ecuadorian central bank digital currency, which was implemented in 2014 and then failed in 2018 because nobody started using it. Let's educate enough people, Tim, to have people not wanting to be a part of that central bank digital currency. But what I'm worried, and this is where Simon Dixon explained to me, and I had a good conversation with him about how
Do
they
you want
would.
to put it back? Just do you want to put it back just on us, you and I, for
Oh yeah,
listeners out
sorry,
there?
yeah, sorry, yeah, of course, yeah, no, it's interesting because what he think that could happen to him is that they would just let the banking system collapse and then say like, well, if you want your money back, your currency back, you could come over to the new central bank digital currency and get everything back, or you could lose everything that you had in your bank. It's your choice. If you want to have any currency left or what you saved and use dollars, Canadian dollars, whatever, you got to come over here and become part of the slave grid.
Yeah, we just started up it's funny, the guy wasn't sawing the entire time, and as soon as you like paused for me to jump in, we got a power saw gun in the background. But yeah,
Yeah.
one thing I just saw like 2 seconds ago flash across Yahoo Finance is inflation is a real threat. Former White House Chief of Staff, and this is Mick Mulvaney. And it's funny how I didn't hear a single worry about spending too much money when Trump was in there, but now I was
Michael
surprised.
Burry though, like Michael Burry came out, the guy that
Yeah,
was the
Big
guy
Short.
behind the bed on the Big Short. He actually came out and is predicting hyperinflation right now. So,
I mean, on a long enough time horizon, that is almost certainty.
oh,
But
100%.
but
But yeah,
but the thing is, even if you're at like 5 or 10, 10 is a lot. So I mean,
yeah,
even if you have five, in like by their own BS measured terms, I mean that would be enough to basically bankrupt anyone that was just sitting in cash, or bankrupt people that were in bonds. Or I mean, it's not going to be a very good time for about 95% of people who are out there. But hopefully, people listening to us would be able to get ahead of themselves. I do want to probably wrap it up soon, because I
yeah.
am in a vacation destination and want to be able to take advantage of. I got to do a little more work here too. But
Yeah, right before we end, I talking about inflation. Here's the heavy inflators right now that are heading for collapse. Look at these guys. The inflation is in Venezuela 2,665. That's official inflation. There's like it's collapsed already. Again, this is their second currency that they've collapsed now, which is the Bolivar Soberano. The old one in 2018, hyperinflation was the Fuerte. Sudan is collapsing. Zimbabwe's currency, Zimbabwe. You know, it's so funny, Tim. I got just a quick point on Zimbabwe is that they actually issued, before they issued the new Zim dollar, Tim. What they did is they actually remonetized the old ones, the old Zim dollar, and then let people like send them in to get US dollars. So they have, I think it was like $47 billion worth of Zim dollars will give you $6-7 or something it was. But
But their
that's
stock
what they
market
did. But
probably went
then,
up a lot.
yeah, but then what they did after that, Tim, is after they gave the people back and they got rid of the old hyperinflated currency, it's like, yeah, we removed the evidence. Now we're gonna create a new currency, and look where it's at already. It's at 321%. Lebanon is on the verge of collapse. Suriname, Iran, Sudan, Argentina, all of them are, on the 40% inflation. That's insane, right? Angola is a serial hyperinflator as well. Turkey is on the verge here. Like that's one of the G20 countries in the world. Like they're on the verge. That will have big ramifications. That actually brings me back here to that the Turkish downgrade right now that happened because he just Tayyip Erdogan actually Recep Tayyip Erdogan actually fired his second central banker, Tim, in about 5 years. So it's not going too well over in Turkey with their currency, even though like they're such a big country. So for them to be at 15% in inflation is pretty insane. Same with Nigeria. Nigeria is actually, Tim, I'm actually working on a guy that has a African called Paxful. An African crypto exchange, and trying to set up an interview potentially with him. He's been on Max Kaiser a lot. Very smart guy. I would like to like bring it forward to people because we had actually a couple of our friends that are on our Discord chat being in Africa lately and talking about different things that are happening there. But I think it would be great to put that on the forefront because I think Africa is on the verge of something big, adopting crypto, Tim.
Yeah, I'm trying to take a look at the Zimbabwe stock market, and it was, yeah, so going back to January 2020, it looked like it was 400,
Yep.
and today is at 8,782. And so when people ask me about the market crashing, it's more, I honestly think that that there's only so far the market can go down, like maybe 20, 30, 40% in a short amount of time, and then the money printing will then make it go back up, which is exactly what we're seeing in some place like Venezuela, where the
So
stock market was. And let's start, we're talking about Zimbabwe. With
what the heck
Zimbabwe,
happened, Tim?
within a
Look at this. What the heck happened in Venezuela? Look at this. I think they had the currency reset there. Did they just like finish their second currency in 3 years? Like, look at this. It's like down at 2,600.
So for people, maybe do you want to explain that for people who are listening and aren't
Yeah.
watching the screen right now?
Yeah, so this is the Venezuelan stock market, the Caracas Stock Exchange. I'm going to pull it out on a larger scale because that actually, a 10-year maybe. Yeah, here we go. So this is the first currency that collapsed, the Bolivar Soberano. And you can see like it went up to like from the bottom here. Let's see if, can you even pull down? It's really hard to get those numbers at the bottom here. And actually, it's like right, here. Can we get a number? Like it's, I can't really get the number, but it's like really low, right? Like you're looking at probably in the 2000s in number. But then it went all the way up because they hyperinflated their currency to 400, almost 500,000 points, their index. But look at this one, Tim. They're just like, let's just like the last hyperinflation was nothing. Let's just go all in here. Look at this one. Like they went all the way up to 2 point, what is it? Like 7, yeah, almost 3 million this time. And that's even higher, way higher than the last one that was at around 500,000. So that's like, what is it? 600% higher than it was last time. And then now it's down. So I got to do some research. Like maybe that's a good thing for our next Tim and John show that we're going to do on what's happening there, because I know that they just recently issued 100 million, 1 million Bolivar Soberano bills. So I'm not sure what's going on there, because you're seeing like suddenly it's reset down to this. So I'll do some more research and see what's going on there. But I wouldn't put it past them that their currency collapsed, because any hyperinflated currency gets destroyed within a year, usually even less, like 6 months, because when trust disappears from any medium of exchange, it becomes worthless pretty quick because nobody uses it. And in the form of government currencies, they just got to print oblivious amounts.
That's a good title of the show. It becomes worthless pretty quick because nobody uses it.
Yeah, and this is just one last thing before I let you go, Tim, because I just I was driving the other day, and I've been driving past this thing without thinking about it for a very long time, but actually it's like, oh shit, I gotta go and take a picture of this. So let me just share the screen, because this is where the economy is heading, to the False Creek. Yeah, this is exactly where the economy
is that right next to Schitt's Creek?
Yeah, pretty close. Well, it's since Schitt's Creek is supposedly in Saskatchewan, right? And this is in Manitoba. Yeah, after you've been in Schitt's Creek, you're heading to the False Creek. So I just thought it was a funny way to end our show today, Tim. Because this is just totally insane. Like the world that we live in, just mass amounts of manipulation, and they're gonna have to continue on it because they put themselves in a corner that they never can get out of without continuing this Ponzi scheme.
It's exactly what it is. One gigantic Ponzi scheme. Well, anyways, thank you for everyone who's listened to us, watched us. You guys can go subscribe to, go to timandjohnshow.com. All the ways to subscribe to us, preferably not on YouTube. But if you are subscribed on YouTube, we do. Or if you're not subscribed to YouTube, we, and if that's how you're watching us, please subscribe there too. It just helps out with the algorithm. And we're approaching 3,000. Got 50 more left to 3,000. And then, doing well on the Discord and everywhere else. And we're probably looking at some alternatives to that. But anyways, thank you guys so much. This is Tim Picciott coming from West Palm Beach. Next time I'll probably be back in Phoenix. But anyways, John Styson from the False Creek. And and we'll talk to you guys later.
Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.